Hey gamers, welcome to my trailer analysis for Bioshock Infinite, the E3 2011 gameplay demonstration as they're showing. I'm going to go through this 15-minute demo and kind of go over some of the things that we've been able to pick apart. This game got a lot of recognition, and I'm going to go ahead and pause it right here. This game got a lot of recognition at E3, a lot of hype, won a lot of Game of the Show awards, and honestly, next to Mass Effect 3, I think this might be one of the most anticipated games for me of 2012. So I wanted to use this as an opportunity to kind of go through this trailer. I think this is probably, like, given what I've seen in this trailer and what I know so far, I think I'm ready to kind of go ghost and just kind of go into the darkness with this game and just kind of buy it when it comes out and play it when it comes out, because I think a lot of information has been given out and it's gotten me really excited about the game. But I'm worried that at this point they're going to go a little too far. Like, if I learn any more, it's going to be it might ruin the experience a little bit for me. So I wanted to do this trailer as kind of a reason to get myself hyped up again for this game, but also mainly it's to provide people who are interested or might be interested in this franchise what it's about, what are some of the things that we can pull out from the trailers, pull out from this demo, and kind of talk about that for a little bit. So I'm going to be pausing this quite a bit. I mean, I'm not sure how many parts this is going to be broken up into, probably 2 or 3 parts. It's going to be quite long, so please bear with me. I'm going to be talking a lot, mainly my impressions about the game, but also a lot of stuff giving backstory, things that I was able to pull together from interviews, different videos that we've seen, talking with where people have talked with Ken Levine, the creative director of the game. So again, if you know all this information, I'm sorry about this, but kind of just should be a good refresher anyway. So hopefully you'll enjoy it, and I had a lot of fun making it. So yeah, let's get started. All right, so as we first start off, I'm going to go ahead and pause and give a little bit of backstory here. So Bioshock Infinite takes place 40 years, actually, before the events of Bioshock and Bioshock 2. Now, actually, that's one of the things I want to bring up, is that we haven't really been confirmed whether or not this takes place within the same universe as Bioshock. But it is a sequel in many ways to Bioshock and Bioshock 2. And Bioshock was a game that took place in 1957 in the fictional city of Rapture. And Rapture was founded by the philanthropist and entrepreneur known as Andrew Ryan. And it was created because he was looking at how the world had reacted to the situation after World War II. And he saw a lot of ideals that really he didn't agree with. There was a lot of capitalism coming from America, and a lot of this was kind of the rise of communism in Russia, China, South Korea, North Korea as well. A lot of influence and domination from the Vatican Church and Catholicism. There were a lot of ideals that were taking place during the post-World War II era, especially, even there was kind of paranoia in the Cold War, the blacklisting. I'm completely forgetting his name. I apologize. So he set out to build a city where the artists would not be constrained, that free speech and free ideals, and people could be had ownership over their own work and their own motives, and they would be freed from all forms of government. So he set out and created Rapture, but he built it in secret. Now, this game takes place 40 years prior in around 1910 and 1920s, and this takes place in the fictional city of Columbia. And Columbia is kind of the female personification of the United States. And the difference between this game and what Bioshock 1 did was that this game actually, Columbia is a city that was not built in secret. It was actually quite grand and was very heavily publicized. It was built during the World's Fair, and it was built at a time when American exceptionalism was really starting to grow on the rise. And the thinking, and Ken Levine has said this before, which was that in that time, technology had progressed forward at such a fast pace that it was kind of making everyone's head spin. So the idea of building a city in the clouds was not that far fetched. I mean, there was a lot of city in the sky, city in the cloud philosophy and thinking back in those days, because if you look back in that time, there were a lot of inventions that changed paradigms and shifted the way the world thought. I mean, electricity, cars, television, radio, not television, sorry, radio, but radio, movies. There were a lot of things that were being invented during this time that were really, really impactful and significant. So Columbia was really an extension of that thinking that, hey, if we're this great, why not? Why can't we build a city in the sky? We can do it. So that's kind of how it takes place. And the city was built during the World's Fair, the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, and was built as kind of a floating World's Fair, as a moving World's Fair. But it also became known as a battleship. It also became a battleship, and unfortunately, it launched an attack against China. This caused the United States to kind of disavow any knowledge of the city, and it kind of faded off into obscurity and just disappeared. And so Columbia became known as this kind of floating Death Star almost, and also kind of a boogeyman, this creature that would come haunt you and impose its will upon you. So that's kind of the reputation that it brought upon it. And you play as Booker DeWitt. He is an ex-Pinkerton agent who has been sent to the city of Columbia to retrieve a girl named Elizabeth. And if you look at this trailer right here in the first frame, right there on the bottom of the screen, you can see Elizabeth right there. She's being held captive against her will in this floating city, and it's your job to go in there and get her out. So let's keep going. And I believe this takes place about a third of the way through the game. And so you're going to go ahead and make your way into this kind of a novelty store. And this is kind of shows off one of the moments that is important to Bioshock, which is that Bioshock is not always a story about, or a game about action and fast-paced action even. It's a game that is able to have quiet moments and make them meaningful as well. You'll see that poster of Comstock. We'll get back to him in just a little bit. But before we do that, the next part I want to get to right here, as we go ahead and pause, is this bucking Bronco vigor. Now, this is an extension, or this is kind of the new way to talk about the powers. And I'll mention the powers a little bit, which was that in Bioshock 1 and 2, the main difference that separated Bioshock from being other shooters was that it had these RPG elements. And the RPG elements involved using certain different powers. And these powers in Bioshock 1 were called plasmids. And plasmids were an extension of, really when I say, I'm going to be using that word a lot, but Bioshock and Bioshock 2 in this game is really a reflection of society at the time. I mean, Ken Levine, as the creative director, he was a big historian. He's a history buff, and he's a history nerd, actually. And he was really fascinated with world history and American history. So a lot of the themes that you see in these games are just extensions and reflections of the thinking of the world at the time. And plasmids were a reflection of the scientific thinking of the world. Around the 1950s, the mid to late 50s, the big scientific discovery at the time was the invention, well, not really invention, but the discovery by Watson and Crick of the double-stranded DNA. So biology had taken a huge leap forward during that era, where scientists were finally able to unlock the secrets of the human genome and figure out what our genetic structure was about. And so Bioshock took that to a little bit of a took that a step forward and said, if scientists were not limited by the constraints of morality, if they were not limited by the constraints of ethics, oddly enough, it was around post World War II when human ethics, the code of human ethics, were being drafted as kind of a response to the Nazi extermination and the Holocaust. And so, Andrew Ryan said, let's remove morality, let's remove ethics, and what can happen if science is allowed to progress undeterred and unconstrained from morality. And the idea was that, well, if we can, we just discovered our own genetic material, what if we can modify our genetic material? And that's the basis for which Atom and plasmids were introduced. And they serve both a narrative purpose, but they also serve a great gameplay purpose, because they allowed you to have these amazing and wonderful powers, such as shooting fire, electricity, ice, a lot of different things. And so it was one of those elements of Bioshock that was really interesting and unique. And in this one, they also have it, but it's a little bit different. And I'll talk about that as we move forward. But in order to retain that kind of gameplay value, because what the plasmids really allowed was that they allowed a nice level of RPG, a great RPG element to the first-person shooter genre, and that these plasmids allow you to play more tactfully, and allowed for different enemies that were weak against certain plasmids, and allowed you to place interactive objects in the environment, such as oil slicks or water, and have different plasmids react with different things in different ways. So it added a great sense of strategy to the game, and so that was something they wanted to continue carrying forward. So what they added was the vigors, and the vigors are kind of reflective of tonics, and tonics were big again during the 1900s, 1910s. If you played Red Dead Redemption, you'll remember one of the characters was this traveling salesman who would sell different types of vigors and tonics to other people, and back then in the 1900s, they would always claim that, oh, if you are bald, just take this tonic and it'll cure your baldness. It'll take this tonic, it'll cure your arthritis. It'll cure anything, any ailment that you have, it can cure it. Well, this is kind of that same idea, but it takes it in the same step, which is if you want to have this tonic that can lift enemies in the sky, if you want to lift enemies in the sky, here's this tonic that'll do it. If you want to shoot crows out of your hands, there's a tonic that'll do it for you. So it's kind of that extension. It's a nice way for them to retain that gameplay mechanic and also make it fit within the narrative. So this one is called Bucking Bronco. I'm not going to tell you what it does, and I'll just let the demo go forward, and you'll see exactly what it does. But as he picks it up, I just want to make a quick pause right here and show you one change to the gameplay that they made, which was, if you look on the bottom left, you'll see a number next to the Bucking Bronco. And the difference is that in the first Bioshock, the plasmids were fueled by something called Eve. And Eve was the kind of currency that allowed you to continue using those plasmids, but you were allowed to use the same plasmid over and over and over again as long as you had enough Eve for it. It was great, but it kind of limited and constrained the design of the game, in that most people, you could pretty much go through the entire game using one plasmid, or you could mix and match. But the game wasn't designed well enough in Bioshock 1 to adapt to the different types of plasmids and situations. So people end up pretty much using one or two plasmids and sticking with them. In this game, the way they're changing it up is they're adding a number constraint, which is that you can only use the tonic or the vigor a certain number of times before it runs out, and then presumably during the game you'll find different tonics, and those will allow you to do different things. But it provides an extra added layer of strategy, in that if you are limited by how many times you can use a vigor, you have to be very careful about how you use it, and you want to make sure you use it in the right situation. So let's keep going forward. This is another element to show kind of the softer moments of the game, the quieter moments of the game, but also to show off Elizabeth and her character and what type of character she is. She's someone who, because of her I guess you'd call it entrapment, she didn't really have a lot of exposure to the outside world. So when you finally free her, she has a lot of trouble adjusting to the real world, but she also approaches the real world with a sense of naivety, and that allows her to have some really kind of humorous moments with Abe Lincoln, but also kind of some interesting moments like where she tries to show you that, oh, this is gold, and it adds a very nice narrative structure. Elizabeth is actually someone who is going to play a very central role, not only within the narrative of the game, but also within the mechanics of the game. If you look on the left, I pause real quick just to show you, there's a sign that says, "Remember the Founders." The Founders will actually come into play a little bit later, and I'll describe who they are, but it also relates back to that poster of the character Comstock. As we move forward, you'll see we're going to search the barrel, and if he sees this, there's something called the Nostrum potluck. If he takes the potluck, you'll see that he now has a choice between choosing 3 different upgrades to the character. This is also going back to the original Bioshock, which had those plasmids, but there were active plasmids that you use, and then there were passive ones, ones that gave you passive abilities. Some that just kind of improved your hacking abilities, some that improved your damage to certain equipment, some that, there were different types of passive abilities, and this looks like it's going to be the same type of system where it'll give you, not system, but same type of idea where it will give you some kind of passive abilities. But it looks like it's just something that you're going to find throughout the environment rather than something that you have to pick up at a plasmid station. So it looks like they're trying to retain a lot of the elements of Bioshock Infinite, but kind of change it up and add it and keep it different and keep it fresh, while also making sure that it fits within the narrative. So, again, as we move forward, we're going to see. Well, we really won't see it, but we're going to see. We're going to hear the sound of Elizabeth's captor, the guy who's, or really the creature that's been keeping her captive all this time. And it's a creature called the Songbird. Now, I'll talk more about the Songbird when we get to him. But for now, the image I want you to think of, and this has been talked about quite a bit, which is that the relationship between Elizabeth and the Songbird is the same as an abusive husband to his wife. And we'll talk more about why that is, what that is, and how that gets conveyed through the game itself. But for now, we're going to make a quick stop, a quick dialogue scene, and then we'll head on outside. And you can see here there's been, Elizabeth definitely is as someone who does not want to go back to that Songbird, to the point where she's saying she would rather have Booker kill her than let her be captured again. All right. So let's head on forward, and let's take our first step out into the world of Columbia. All right, here we go. Nice. This is going to be a nice long pause. And let's look at our time. We're about 17 minutes in. All right. So the tears are something that are very important to Bioshock Infinite as well. Now, earlier I mentioned that the plasmids were an extension of the scientific thinking at the time that Rapture was being created, at the time Bioshock 1 took place, which was around the 1950s. The tears are very much an extension of the scientific advancements and the scientific philosophies of the 1910s and 1920s. And around the 1910s and 1920s, the big scientific advancement was in the field of physics. This was around the time that Albert Einstein was coming into fruition. Heisenberg was coming into fruition. So a lot of their thinking was big at the time. They were really expanding the scope of the universe. They were physicists, and they were coming up with these amazing new models of the universe, and the talks of the space-time continuum, parallel universes was a really big field of discussion at the time. So again, to follow the theme of Bioshock, these tears are very much an extension, a step forward, if you will, into that level of scientific thinking, which is that, hey, there are actually tears in the space-time continuum. There are actually parallel universes. It's not just theory anymore. Let's turn it into a gameplay mechanic. Let's turn it into a narrative mechanic. And these tears are something that is affecting the world of Columbia only. It's not affecting the entire world, but it's affecting the world of Columbia. Now, how it affects the world, why it's affecting the world, we don't know. Hopefully we'll find out as the game progresses. But it's something that everyone in the world can see. You, as the player, can see them. All the citizens and civilians of the game can see them. But what makes Elizabeth unique, not only as a narrative character, non-NPC, but also as a mechanical character, is that she's actually able to interact with these tears. These little ripples in the space-time continuum is something that she can interact with, and she can reach into these alternate dimensions, alternate universes, and pull the objects out into our universe. So if you see on the little icon on the bottom, if you press the A button, it will open that tear, and it will take that freight car, which is in some parallel universe, and bring it into our universe. And as in doing so, if you look right below the A button, there are 3 dots, which is both again a narrative mechanic and a gameplay mechanic, which is that Elizabeth has this ability, but she's not very comfortable using that ability. She's very reluctant to use it, she's not able to control it as well, and that's something that you as the player are going to help her do as the game progresses. But as the game progresses and as she gets better at it, you'll then have the option to open more tears within a given scenario. So that's something that is pretty neat, like a way for them to kind of, again, blend narrative with gameplay at the same time. And there are many different things that she can actually affect in the world, not only just freight cars, but missile turrets. She can affect doorways. She can bring up a barrel of weapons. She can actually bring in other people. People reach into dimension to bring people who are in another dimension and bring them into our dimension, and then help them fight for you, so that they can help fight for you. So it's going to be very interesting to see what type of things that you'll see in the game. So we'll go ahead and keep going, and we're going to get a little bit of story here where you talk about Comstock building. He is kind of you could say the de facto leader of Columbia, and you're trying to get to his building so that you can help Elizabeth and Booker escape, and also to help her learn to control her powers and understand her powers a little bit better. Now, as we approach this next section, this is again a nice, huge narrative moment, and again introduces another gameplay mechanic, which is taken from Bioshock 1, but also taken from kind of Mass Effect 2, which is that interrupt system where certain events in the game you can choose to interrupt. So right there, you saw that if you press the A button, you can just choose to euthanize the horse. But if you let it go, then it'll go, kind of have two different directions, two different paths throughout the story. Now, what's interesting about the game is that, and kind of a big question I'm going to have is how big does it affect the story? Because as you see right here, if you chose to euthanize that horse, you will not see the next scene that's about to occur, which is a pretty big scene. It doesn't really do much for the game, but it does inform a lot of the story, and really is I think pretty significant. So by choosing not to euthanize the horse, instead we get a glimpse into 1980s. So if we look right here, take a quick pause, you'll see this movie theater which shows Revenge of the Jedi instead of Return of the Jedi. So again, she just opened a tear into the basically the early 80s. And I don't really have the sound in the background, but if you listen to the background, you can hear a Tears for Fears song, which was actually in the first Bioshock gameplay demo in the bar. It was playing on the music on the recorder. So it was kind of hinted at in the first demo, but this is the one where it kind of just is a little bit more overt and a little bit more in your face about that. So this is definitely something that, but again, this whole scene is predicated on the fact that you chose not to kill the horse. So the big question is that, for me, the question I have is how far are they going to take the choices that you make? How far are the choices you make going to have on the gameplay and also on the story? Because if players go by and euthanize the horse, they may have never seen that. So would they have still gotten that story another way, or would they have just missed it entirely? Who knows how it might have happened? It's a very interesting mechanic that I think, I can't wait to see how it pans out in the final game. So we're going to go ahead and move on here, and we'll take a quick pause right here as we see a poster of Comstock. Now, Comstock is, like I said, the leader of Columbia, and once Columbia kind of went rogue and hid from the world, the citizens eventually started, the whole city kind of erupted into a civil war. And in the civil war, there were two factions that basically broke out. The first faction are known as the Founders. And the Founders are led by this guy named Comstock, and the Founders are based on basically the founders of Columbia. And they are the ruling elite. And the other side of the faction are a group known as the Vox Populi, which is Latin for voice of the people. This group is kind of a mix of a lot of smaller factions that have banded together to fight the Founders and bring back the city of Columbia for its people. That's basically what Vox Populi is. And the Vox Populi are led by a leader named Daisy Fitzroy. Let me double check that right here. And Daisy Fitzroy. So she's the leader of the Vox Populi, and there's this big civil war that's breaking out between the two. And so what's great about this game, again, that is really a nice improvement from the first Bioshock, is that Bioshock 1 had that same kind of civil war breakout and turn a city from a utopia into a dystopia, but you as a player were there at the end of it. You were there after the war had broken out and everything had resolved, Whereas in this game, it's nice that they're actually throwing you in the middle of the conflict. So you are actually there as the conflict is progressing. And if we unpause the game and move forward a little bit, you'll see one of the Vox Populi members take a Molotov and throw it at the poster. So it's nice because you see a lot more citizens throughout the crowd. You'll see NPCs in the game itself. It shows a lot more interaction with the world and with its characters, as opposed to Bioshock 1, which was mainly through audio logs, which were great, but it was kind of a very passive, interactive experience, whereas this seems to be taking it in a much more active way. You can see right there, there's a poster for the Vox Populi. You can see that even though the Vox Populi are essentially a voice for the people, they're not exactly a benign group. They seem to be very aggressive towards citizens. And so here we go. Right here, we'll actually pause right here and show you another element of the game, which is the element of choice. Now, in Bioshock 1 and Bioshock 2, your main choice was the Little Sisters. When you rescued the Little Sisters from the Big Daddies, you had a pretty much binary choice of, should I rescue them or should I not rescue them? And the choice affected the amount of Adam you got, but it also kind of had a moral weight to it of, what kind of player do you want to be? It was great, but it was, again, one of those situations where a lot of games suffer in that once you make a choice, you are stuck down a specific path. What Bioshock Infinite is trying to do that is very, very interesting is that it is not about making choices towards a moral weight. It's more the fact that these choices are made because Booker and Elizabeth are just trying to survive. Their goal is to get out of the world of Columbia. So stopping to help someone doesn't necessarily facilitate that goal. So you see this guy on the right who's being tortured, and Elizabeth said maybe we should help him, but Booker says, look, forget about it. It's not worth our time. We can get in a lot of trouble. And as I pause real quick, we're going to see another section right here that I'll talk about. But that's the whole point, is that the choices you make, it's not even about black and white or shades of gray. It's that you have to always, the idea that they're talking about is that in this game, it's all about survival, and the choices you make should be facilitated towards surviving and getting to your goal. It's not about doing the right thing, because doing the right thing necessarily isn't going to help you. In fact, it might cause you more trouble and might do things that might not be good for you. So that's something that's really interesting, an interesting approach to decision making in the game. But also, what's nice is that this game is not about dialogue trees. It's not about it's not a game about making a choice and then seeing or rather than, I think a better way to say is that the choices you make are through the gameplay itself. So you saw right there where that guy was kind of harassing Elizabeth, and the way for you as the player to affect that situation was he just kind of pulled a gun on him. So you can threaten civilians, you can threaten the NPCs, you can straight up kill the NPCs. There's a lot of different ways on how you can choose and how you approach each different situation. If you look on the right there, there's another little tear in the environment. Now, here we go. He picks up another vigor, which is the murder of crows. This was the one that was actually shown in the original demo as well. So here you again make another decision choice, but the choice you make is not should we kill a guy or let him live. It's the direction, the path that you want to take. So it again shows that Bioshock is trying to go back to that non-linearity. That was one of the complaints of Bioshock 2, was that it was a very, very linear game. So this game is all about, like, you're trying to get to an area, you have a goal, but how you want to get to that goal is totally up to you. So you can go to the right. I'm not exactly sure what's on the right, but instead our character decides to go to the left. And if you, again, look right up here, you see Daisy Fitzroy. As I said, she is the leader of the Vox Populi. Again, a great art style, great aesthetic, very July 4th, 1900s, the bright summer's day, as Ken Levine talks about it. And here we go. Here's another example of dynamic decision making in the game. This is a dentist that's being thrown out of the window, and as he's being thrown out, he's going to be assaulted by some Vox Populi members. Now, this is again a situation where you can choose to rescue that guy if you want. Now, if you rescue him, Ken Levine actually did talk about what happens is that if you rescue the guy later on in the game, you'll actually see him going up to some dead bodies and pulling the gold teeth out of it, because he is a dentist, but he's a very crooked, evil dentist. But he remembers the fact that you rescued him, so he just gives you a bag of gold teeth. And you think to yourself, man, what did I just do? I just rescued this guy, I saved his life. I should feel good about it, but look at what he's doing. He's this kind of gold digger, basically. He's this very crooked person. So again, it adds to that dynamic decision making, that the choices you make, if they, it's not about making good or bad choices, it's about surviving in the world. And sometimes surviving in the world means not doing anything, letting people die, especially if you don't know what type of person they are. So here we go. One of the next scenarios right here, you're going to see a postman who's going to get executed. And this again goes back to that idea that I've been talking about, and the question I've been having about the game is how much will a choice affect the gameplay? Because if he chooses to let the execution happen, he can just go on to Comstock's house or building or whatever, which is it's pretty much right across the way. But instead, he chooses to stop the execution. And now that he stops the execution, you basically start this entire battle section. So you can see kind of Elizabeth looking all over in shock. So now we're going to have our first big battle section happening in the game. Now, hopefully, the game definitely seems to be modernizing its controls a little bit. Instead of, and we'll take a quick pause right here, instead of kind of, it's trying to take a little bit more of a Call of Duty approach, the aiming down the sight mechanic, but it's fine. I mean, it's, even Bioshock 1 was something that I never really appreciated the gameplay of. It was more the story and the atmosphere and the characters that I enjoyed. This game looks like it's actually going to be doing a lot better with the gameplay, so that's exciting for me, because that was one of the things of Bioshock 2 that I really enjoyed, was that the gameplay was a lot better. The shooting felt a lot better. Unfortunately, it was the opposite, where the story and the characters just didn't do much for me. So it looks like here they're kind of just simplifying the controls into two weapons and two vigors. I'm not sure if that'll change in the final game or not, but for the time being, it looks like it's going to be that way. And like I said, there's that aiming down the sight mechanic that you have. So then here we go. Here's how those tears are going to factor into the gameplay. So if you look right here, she can open a tear, bring up this carriage, and that can provide cover against the fire that you're seeing up there. She can also open a tear for these weapons. That'll probably offer some better weaponry that you can use to take out the guys. Or she can open a tear into the doorway, and hopefully that doorway can then allow you a means of escaping and retreating back. Now, one of the things, again, I don't know if this is a mechanic that'll stay, but it looks like they've taken away the health system from Bioshock 1, where you had to use med packs, and instead they're just going to give you regenerating health in this game. But anyway, if you look back, she's just going to go ahead. He chooses to open up cover, and there you see him using bucking Bronco, which is going to basically levitate all the enemies in an area and send them flying. Now, the other mechanic, and I'll pause real quick right here, was that the big mechanic, the next big mechanic in this game, and there's a lot to talk about, but the next big one is the Skylines. And the Skylines are a means of transportation. It's how they were able to get freight cars and people from city to city on these sort of floating islands. But now you as a player can, again, use that as a means of transportation. And it adds a great sense of verticality to the game. So you saw right there where he was on the bottom level, and the guys were shooting at him from top. Now, instead of having to run up the stairs and get all the way to them, he can just hop on the skyline and get there. Now, the way the mechanic works is that you see that little white reticle in the middle. That shows basically where you will land and the area that you can jump to. And it's also shown when you try to jump to a skyline. So he's going to go ahead and jump down and then use it to take those two guys out. It's a pretty exciting mechanic. I mean, it adds a great pace to the game. It makes it move a lot faster. And you see Elizabeth over there. Now she's going to go ahead and point out a guy that's approaching on the left, which shows that she's someone who is going to be very helpful to you in combat. He uses bucking Bronco again, but now that basically that one tear that basically was listed as cover can now actually be used to take out guys. So you see right there, it can actually work both offensively and defensively as well. He goes ahead and hops onto another skyline and takes out another character. Now, one of the things to note that during this entire time, he's not actually watching Elizabeth. She's on her own. You see right here, he's going to take up two more weapons. So it looks like they are going to go for a two-weapon system, similar to kind of Halo, how Halo did it. And you see other enemies approaching on the skyline, kind of jumping from skyline to skyline. It looks really, really cool. Sorry, just going to make a quick pause and a quick note right here. But like I said, Elizabeth is a character that is someone you don't need to worry about. It was something that they mentioned very early on in the game, is that this is not one giant escort mission. She's there to help expand your abilities in the game. She's there to help expand the options that you have in the game, but she is not a character that you have to worry about. She can take care of herself from the beginning of the game to the end of the game, which is great because it allows you a lot of freedom in where you want to go. I mean, you can go anywhere in the world, and she'll be able to take care of herself. And eventually she will find her way to you, or you can find your way to her. So you can see that there's a lot of kind of crazy combat that's kind of going on. This little thing right here, this kind of call signal that he releases, is similar to the turrets. I'll make a quick pause here. It was similar to the security cameras in Bioshock 1, where if the security cameras caught you for a while, they would basically call in those little robotic those flying turrets. Well, this says, if you let one of those guys activate that signal, it'll call in a Zeppelin. So it's definitely, they're trying to expand the scope, but also increase that dynamic nature of the game where things can happen any which way. There's no telling, no one scenario will play out the same way depending on who you are as a character. Now, here's one thing that is a little interesting. I don't know how this works, but you see right here, I thought that she could have opened this because there was still a dot there, but apparently she can't. So like I said, it's one of those things where Elizabeth can only interact with so many objects at a given time. So it adds a sense of strategy to the game that just prevents you from kind of opening up tears and everything. You see right here that, but if you were able to open up that tear and open up that rocket launcher, that could have been used to help you take out the Zeppelin that's there. But instead, Booker is going to try and get onto the Zeppelin itself and take him out. And it looks, this just looks absolutely incredible, where you see that Zeppelin just firing rockets. And one of the great things about these Skylines is that you can hop from Skyline to Skyline. So there's a lot of movement. This game seems to be moving very, very fast. It's a very different game from Bioshock in the speed and the pace at which it's moving, but it still retains that depth, that strategy that made Bioshock 1 so special. It was basically Bioshock 1 was referred to as the thinking man's shooter, and this definitely seems to be keeping up with that. So you see right there, though, that you need a little bit of skill with those Skylines, and if you're not careful, you can actually, I'm assume you can get yourself knocked out, or knocked off those Skylines by those freight cars. So yeah, it's a mechanic that I'm sure it's going to take some time for all the players to get used to. So we'll see how it kind of pans out. And he's going to show another vigor that he got, the crows, that'll be used to distract guards, similar to the swarm insects from Bioshock 2. So, but if you look, like, it's not just you as the player that can interact with these Skylines. The enemies can interact with them as well. They can chase you. They said in the interviews that you will be able to shoot guys from it. I mean, in this part they haven't shown it so far, but it looks like hopefully you will be able to. Again, you can notice that he's having to make his way from Skyline to Skyline, not only to move around the environment, but also to avoid getting hit. But you can see a really quick pace to the game. Like I said, it's moving much faster. And I'll make a quick pause right here, again showing how Elizabeth, this whole time, like, Elizabeth is on her own. She's doing her own thing. You don't have to worry about her at all. She basically just gave this guy a nice kick to the nuts. She's a character that is very capable and very competent. And so, it's someone that you really don't have to worry about. But and what's great about her is that she is there to essentially expand the scope of the player's tools and abilities, and expand the options that the player has. So we'll go ahead and keep on going, and we're actually getting pretty close to the end. But before we do, we're gonna see one pretty cool section right here, which is that, like Booker said, he's gonna try and jump on the top of that Zeppelin. So he finally made his way around to it, and there you go. He's gonna go ahead and jump on. And once he does, he's just going to start mowing down the fools on this Zeppelin. So again, as you see, like, as he uses that bucking Bronco, the number of times it can be used is starting to go down. So there is a limit to how many times you can use it. It's not something that you can use all the time. Now, obviously, they made sure he can use it enough for the demo, but I imagine that as you progress through the game, that'll eventually run out. And he goes ahead and shoots that. Now let's see if I can pause it quick enough for this. But right there. So you see another mechanic right here. Pretty quick, like once you get on that Zeppelin, obviously you need a way off of it. I'm sure this is kind of an auto mechanic where you just hit the button and he'll make sure he jumps on a skyline right there, which is pretty insane. Like I'm surprised he didn't just break his arm off. Which obviously, yeah, it's not feasibly possible, but hey, that's what video games are all about. So but what was amazing about this whole section was this was all because you tried to save a goddamn postman. So if you hadn't saved the postman, what would have happened? You still have had to fight those guys. If you look off on the right, you can still see that Zeppelin just kind of falling down. All right, here we go. So here's the Songbird. Now, like I said, he's the guardian of Elizabeth. He's there to kind of take her back. You can see if you saw in his eye right there, he's already been damaged a little bit. Whether that's damaged by Booker or by someone else, we really don't know. We'll see in later stages. But if you look right here, the Songbird is a very aggressive person. Like I said earlier, the Songbird is like an abusive husband. He's someone who's there to protect Elizabeth and take care of her, but he's also keeping her prisoner, making sure she can't go anywhere. And that leads to a very strained relationship between her, a very complicated relationship, where and he's a very jealous husband as well too. But it's a relationship where he was pretty much her only friend since childhood. But he was also her warden, like I said, keeping her captive. So it leads to a very complicated relationship, and one that should be very interesting as you go along. But obviously someone that she doesn't want to be with. And so Booker, the next part of this game is going to be Booker trying to chase after her and clearly get her back. And that'll do it for the end of the demo. And there we go. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is Bioshock Infinite. I want to thank everyone for listening to this. It's been a pleasure. Like I said, I think at this point I'm ready to go Ghost and just let the game speak for itself when it finally comes out. I want to be surprised. I don't want to know anything else about the game. That having been said, I see another trailer. I'll probably click on it. We'll see what they decide to talk about next. I'm very, very excited for this game. Any questions, any comments, please go ahead and send them, leave them on the bottom of the video. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.